sinners. The father of the faith, the high septon in Old Town teaches us, even the good and most noblest of kings, and the most chivalrous of true knights, may find themselves overcome by rage and lust and envy, and commit acts that shame them and tarnish their good names. But also the vilest and most evil of men, the wickedest of women, likewise may do good from time to time, for love and compassion and pity may be found in even the blackest and darkest of hearts. We are as the gods made us, wrote Septon Bath, the wisest man ever to serve in the role of Hand of the King. Strong and weak, good and bad, cruel and kind, heroic and selfish. Know that, if you would ever rule over the kingdoms of men. Wise words that seem men such as King Jaehaerys took to heart. Seldom was the truth of his words seen as clearly as during the year 50 AC, the 50th year after Aegon's conquest. As the new year dawned, all across Westeros, plans were being made to mark half a century of Targaryen rule, with feasts, fairs and tourneys. The dark days and horror of King Maegor's rule were receding into the past. The Iron Throne and the Faith were finally reconciled, and the young, promising King Jaehaerys was the darling of the small folk and great lords alike, from Old Town to the Wall. Yet, unbeknownst to all but a few, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and faintly in the distance, wise men could hear the rumble of thunder. A realm with two kings is like a man with two heads pulling in different directions, to the detriment of all. In 50 AC, the realm of Westeros found itself blessed with only one king, a hand, but 3 queens, like it was in Maegor's day. But whereas Maegor's queens had been consorts, subservient to his will, living and dying at his whim, each of the queens of this half-century was a power in her own right, but some held more power than others. Currently sat in the Red Keep of King's Landing, upon the Iron Throne of Aegon the Conqueror, sat Queen Regent Alyssa Velaryon, widow of the late King Aenys Targaryen, mother to his son and now young King Jaehaerys, and wife to the King's Hand, Rogar Baratheon. Just across Blackwater Bay on Dragonstone, the smoky ancient seat of House Targaryen, since the doom of Valyria, a younger queen had arisen when Alyssa's daughter, Alysanne, a maid of only 13, had pledged her love to her brother, King Jaehaerys, against the wishes of her mother and her mother's lord husband, Rogar Baratheon, and far to the west across the realm in the Sunset Sea on Fair Isle, with the whole width of Westeros separating her from both mother and sister, was Alyssa's eldest daughter, the dragonriding Rhaena Targaryen, widow of Prince Aegon the Uncrowned, widow of Maegor the Cruel, arguably the widow of 2 kings. In the Westerlands, Riverlands, and even parts of the Reach, men had already begun to call her the Queen in the West, to differentiate her from her mother and sister, the Regent and the true Queen, 2 sisters and a mother. The 3 queens were bound by blood and grief and suffering, and yet between them lay a deep and dark shadows, both old and new, growing darker by the day, with no sign of healing or peace. The amity and the unity of purpose that had enabled Jaehaerys and his sisters and their mother to topple Maegor the Cruel had begun to fray, and long, simmering resentments and divisions made themselves clear, with some of them persisting back before the rise of Maegor. For the remainder of the regency, the boy king and his young queen would find themselves deeply at odds with the King's Hand and the Queen Regent, in a rivalry that would continue into Jaehaerys' own reign proper, and threaten to plunge the 7 kingdoms into civil war. The immediate cause of the tensions was the king's sudden and secret marriage to his sister, which the Hand and the Queen Regent had been taken unawares by, throwing their own plans and schemes into disarray. It would be a mistake to believe that that was the sole cause of this estrangement. The other wedding that had made 49 AC the year of the 3 brides also left its scars. That of Rhaena Targaryen to Andro Farman, and also the golden wedding between Alyssa and Rogar, perhaps out of arrogance, and some say even pride. Rogar had never asked Jaehaerys for leave to wed his mother, which would usually have been appropriate, an omission the boy king took as a slight and a sign of disrespect. Moreover, the king did not approve of the match, as he would later confess to Septon Bath. While he valued Lord Rogar as a counsellor and a friend, he did not need a second father, and thought his own judgment, temperament, and intelligence to be superior to his hands. Jaehaerys also felt he should have been consulted about his sister Rhaena's marriage, though he felt it slightly less strongly, given Rhaena was his elder sister and had also suffered a great deal under Maegor. Queen Alyssa, for her part, was deeply hurt that she had neither been advised nor invited to Rhaena's wedding on Fair Isle, which was understandable for a mother. But she knew her daughter well enough to know she always had this independent spirit. Away in solitude in the west, Rhaena Targaryen nursed her own deep-rooted grievances as well, as she confided to the old friends and favourites she had gathered around her to form her own small court. Rhaena neither understood nor shared her mother's affection for Rogar Baratheon, though she honoured him begrudgingly for rising in support of Jaehaerys against Maegor. His inaction when her own husband, Prince Aegon, faced Maegor in battle was something she could not forgive nor forget. As time ticked on by, Rhaena grew even more resentful that her own claim to the throne and that of her twin daughters had been disregarded in favour of that of her baby brother, as she was wont to call Jaehaerys. She was the firstborn, she reminded anyone who would listen, and had been a dragon rider before any of her siblings. Yet all of them, even my own mother, had conspired to pass her over. It's now very easy to look back with the benefit of hindsight, to say Jaehaerys and Alysanne in the end likely had the right of it in the conflicts that arose during the last year of his mother's regency, and to cast Queen Alyssa and Lord Rogar as villains. That is how the singers tell the tale. Certainly, the swift and sudden marriage of Jaehaerys and Alysanne was a romance of the scale of Florian the Fool and his jonquil, to hear them sing of it, and in songs, as ever, love conquers all. The truth, we submit, is less simple. Queen Alyssa's misgivings about the match grew out of a genuine concern for her children, the Targaryen dynasty, and the realm as a whole. Nor were her fears without true foundation. It is clear, however, that Lord Rogar Baratheon's motives were much less selfless. A proud man, he had been stunned and angered by the ingratitude of the boy king. He had regarded as more of a son, and humiliated when forced to back down at the gates of Dragonstone in front of his own men. A hardened warrior to the bone, Rogar had once dreamed of facing Maegor the Cruel in single combat, and could not stomach being shamed by a boy of 15. Lest we think too harshly of him, we would do well to remember Septon Bath's words. Though he would do some cruel, foolish, and evil things during his last year as Hand, he was not a cruel or evil man at heart, not even a fool. He had once been a hero, and we must recall that even as we look at the darkest years of his life, he was a good man. In the immediate aftermath of his confrontation with Jaehaerys, Rogar could think of nothing else but the humiliation he had suffered. His first impulse was to return to Dragonstone with more men, enough to overwhelm the garrison and resolve the situation by force. As for the Kingsguard, Rogar reminded the council that the White Swords had sworn to lay down their lives for the king. I shall be pleased to give them that honour. When Lord Tully pointed out that Jaehaerys could simply close the gates of Dragonstone against them, Rogar was undeterred. Let him. I can take the castle by storm if need. It was only then Queen Alyssa could reach his lordship through his wrath and dissuade him from the folly. My love, she said softly, my children ride dragons, and we do not. The Queen Regent, no less than her husband, wished to have the king's rash marriage undone, for she was convinced that word of it would once again set the faith against the crown. Her fears were fanned by Septon Matthias. Once away from Jaehaerys, and secure in the knowledge his lips would not be sewn shut, the Septon found his tongue once again, and spoke of little else but how all decent folk would condemn the king's incestuous union. Had Jaehaerys and Alysanne returned to King's Landing to celebrate the new year as the Queen prayed, they would come to their senses and repent this folly, she told the council. Reconciliation would be possible, but that did not happen. When a fortnight came and went, then another, and still the king did not appear at court, Alyssa announced her intention to return to Dragonstone, to beg her children to come home. Rogar forbade it angrily. If you go crawling back to him, the boy will never listen to you again, he said. He has put his own desires ahead of the good of the realm, and that cannot be allowed. Do you want him to end as his father did? And so the queen bent to his will and did not go. That Queen Alyssa wished to do the right thing, no man should doubt, Septon Bath wrote years later. Sad to say, however, she often seemed at a loss of what that thing might be. She desired above all to be loved, admired, and praised, a yearning she shared with King Jaehaerys, her first husband. A ruler must sometimes do things that are necessary but unpopular. The thing is, these things Queen Alyssa could seldom bring herself to do. Days passed and turned to weeks that turned to fortnights, while hearts hardened to stone and men grew more resolute on both sides of Blackwater Bay. The boy king and his little queen remained on Dragonstone, awaiting the day Jaehaerys would take the rule of the realm into his own hands. Alyssa and Rogar continued to hold the reins of power in King's Landing, searching for a way to undo the marriage and avert the calamity they were so certain was to come. Aside from the council, they told no one of what had transpired on Dragonstone, and Lord Rogar commanded the men who had accompanied them to speak no word of what they had seen, at the penalty of losing their tongues. Once the marriage had been annulled, his lordship reasoned, it would be as it had never happened, so far as most of Westeros was concerned, so as long as it remained secret. Until the union was consummated, it could easily be set aside. This would prove to be a vain hope, as we now know, but Rogar Baratheon in 50 AC, it seemed a possibility. For a time he must surely have drawn encouragement from the king's own silence. Jaehaerys had moved very swiftly to marry Alysanne, but having done the deed, he seemed in no great haste to announce it. He certainly had the means to do so, had he desired so. Maester Callapar, still spry at 80, had been serving since Queen Visenya's day, and was ably assisted by 2 younger maesters. Dragonstone had a full complement of ravens. At a word from Jaehaerys, his marriage could have been proclaimed from one end of the realm to the other, even across the narrow sea. But he did not speak that word. Scholars to this day still debate as the reasons for his silence. Was he repenting a match made in haste, as Queen Alyssa would have hoped? Had Alysanne offended him in some manner? Had he grown fearful of the realm's response, recalling all that had befallen his brother? Was it possible that Septon Matthias's dire prophecies had shaken him more than he cared to admit? Or was he simply just a boy of 15 who had acted rashly with no thought to consequence, only to find himself now at a loss of how to proceed? There are arguments for all of these explanations, but in light of what we know now about Jaehaerys, they ultimately rang hollow. Young or old, this was a king who never acted without thinking. To this, it seems plain that Jaehaerys was not repenting his marriage, and had no intention of undoing it. He had chosen the queen he wanted, and would make the realm aware of that in due course, but at a time of his own choosing, in a manner best calculated to lead to acceptance, when he was a man grown, and a king ruling in his own right, not a boy who had wed in defiance of his regent's wishes. The young king's absence from court did not go unnoticed for long. The ashes of the bonfires lit in celebration of the new year had scarce grown cold before the people at King's Landing began asking questions. To curtail the rumours, Alyssa put out word his grace was resting and reflecting on Dragonstone, the ancient seat of his house and childhood. But as more time passed with still no sign of the king, lords and small folk began to wonder, was he ill? Had he been made a prisoner for reasons yet unknown? The personable and handsome boy king had moved amongst the people at King's Landing so freely, seemingly delighting in mingling with them, that this sudden disappearance seemed unlike him. Queen Alysanne, for her part, was in no haste to return to court. Here I have you to myself, day and night, she told Jaehaerys. When we go back, I shall be fortunate to snatch an hour with you, for every man in Westeros will want a piece of you. For her, these days on Dragonstone were idyllic. Many years from now, when we are old and grey, we shall look back upon these days and smile, remembering how happy we were. Jaehaerys himself no doubt shared some of these sentiments, but the young king had other reasons for remaining on Dragonstone. Unlike his uncle Maegor, he was not prone to bursts of rage, but he was more than capable of anger, and he would not forget nor forgive his deliberate exclusion from his council meetings, wherein his marriage and that of his sister were being discussed. And whilst he would always remain grateful to Rogar Baratheon for helping him to the Iron Throne, Jaehaerys did not intend to be ruled by him. I had one father, he said to Maester Callapar during those days on Dragonstone. I do not require a second. The king recognised and appreciated the virtues of the hand, but he was aware of his flaws as well. Flaws that had become very apparent in the days leading up to the Golden Wedding, when Jaehaerys himself had sat in audience with the lords of the realm, whilst Rogar was hunting and drinking and deflowering countless maidens. Jaehaerys was also aware of his own shortcomings he intended to rectify before he sat the Iron Throne. His father, King Aenys, had been slighted as a weak man, in part because he was not a warrior that his brother Maegor was. Jaehaerys was determined that no man would ever question his own courage or skill at arms. On Dragonstone he had Sir Merrill Bullock, commander of the castle garrison, his sons Sir Alyn and Sir Howard, a seasoned master at arms in Sir Aylys Scales, and his own 7, the finest fighters in the realm. Every morning Jaehaerys trained with each of them in the castle yard, shouting at them to come at him harder, to press him, to harry him, and attack him in every way they knew. From sunrise till noon he worked with them, honed his skills with sword and spear, and mace and axe, while his young queen looked on. It was a hard and brutal regime. Each bout ended only when the king himself, or his opponent, declared him dead. King Jaehaerys died so often that men of the garrison made a game of it, shouting, "The king is dead," every time he fell, and "Long live the king," when he struggled back to his feet. His foes began a contest, wagering with one another to see which of them could kill the king the most. Jaehaerys was often bruised and bloody by evening, to Alysanne's distress, but his prowess improved markedly that near the end of his time on Dragonstone, Sir Aylys himself told him he would never be a Kingsguard, but if by some sorcery your uncle Maegor himself were to rise from the grave, my coin would be on you. One evening, after a day in which Jaehaerys had been severely tested and battered, Maester Callipper said to him, "Your Grace, why do you punish yourself so harshly? The realm was at peace." The young king only smiled and replied, "The realm was at peace when my grandsire died, but scarcely had my father climbed onto the throne. The foes rose up at every side. They were testing him, to learn if he was strong or weak. They will test me as well." He was not wrong, though his first trial, when it came, would be one of a very different nature, one that no amount of training in the yard at Dragonstone could prepare him for. For it was his worth as a man, and his love for his queen, that were to be put to the test.